If you're back to watch 6th place run round 6, I'm assuming you've watched some of these before, so we're going to go a little different this one. There's that leaderboard. It's a cut and paste. I still haven't figured out how I'm going to score this final round, but that's for later. This is, of course, round 6, the raid. It's 90 gates, and here's the rules. Gate touches, like that's fine. I mean, it's okay. It's totally allowed. You miss a gate, see the arrows pointing to the right. If you go too far to the left, you get reset to the previous gate. But if you flip over like that, you get moved back. Same thing, back to the previous checkpoint. Pretty simple. I feel like I'm getting a little better at it now. Reversing is allowed, touching the gates is okay. Knocking a gate over or missing one, reset back to the last checkpoint. It's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. So now we get to the actual run. This is currently sitting in 6th place. This is Colonel Mustard, the SCX-10-3, who since the start of this contest is basically completely different. Like, he's got different knuckles, portal housings, rims, tires, shocks, shock towers, servo, motor, pretty much everything except the chassis, the axles, and the body have been changed. And full disclosure, this isn't even, like, I don't own this one. This is a buddy of mine who only drives it here, so it lives here, and it kind of became an impromptu competitor. Much like I don't Ironside's the TRX4 Defender. That one's not mine either. It just lives here, and I drive it more than the guy that owns it. But anyhow, back to the Colonel. As I had mentioned in previous videos featuring the SCX-10-3, I went through a long period under the impression that it was something that it's not, because it is definitely a trail truck that can also rock crawl out of the box, to clarify. As it sits now, the Colonel is a little bit over 8 pounds. I think it's like 8 pounds, 3 ounces. It's got those modded Canyon Trails stretched onto some 2.2 wheels that my buddy bought mistakenly, thinking they were 1.9s. Crammed them on there anyway, and it actually helped with sidewall flex a little bit, so that was a fortuitous mistake. But what has been done to this particular SCX-10-3 in changing all those parts is basically making it less of what it is and trying to make it into something that it's not, because it is not explicitly a rock crawler. It's a trail truck. It does have dig, which is not active on this one, and in its current configuration, dig would probably help a little. But I had meant to lead this off by saying I was going to make some contradictory statements about the Colonel, and I'm so far in now I can't remember if I remembered to do that. But through the course of this, I will inevitably make some contradictory statements about the Colonel, in that it is quite capable as a rock crawler to a point now. I mean, it has so much brass on it, it's gained 2 pounds? 2 pounds-ish? And at lower speeds, it crawls quite well. It's got that 1800 kV Hobbywing Fusion in there, which, frankly, this is its least smooth setup, hooked up to that particular gearbox. We have several of the Fusions here. The Lil Yellow, the Ecto, has a Fusion. Blue Sky High has a Fusion. And it's all different gearboxes, and this is the least smooth. The low speed control is not as good. And I think that goes to my primary complaint about the SCX-10 which is, yes, it has a 2-speed, and this one is active, but first gear and second gear are way too close together. Like, sometimes I can't tell if it's in first gear or second gear. That might have something to do with it having a relatively low kV motor in it, but isn't that kind of the point of a 2-speed gearbox? So I don't understand the need to add the complexity of a 2-speed if you're not going to go Traxxas style and put a really big difference in ratios between first gear and second gear. I think in first gear, I feel like the kernel does about 5 miles an hour in first, and in second it does like 7. So I don't think it's enough. Which, unrelated, but goes directly to the second and largest complaint, which is the body. It looks good, and it is kind of what makes a 10.3 what it is, but in terms of performance, that body is the biggest hindrance this thing has. If you take the body off and drive it around for a little while, it suddenly becomes really quite capable. Not amazingly capable, but really quite capable. Because if you take a TRX-4 and take the body off, it's like you're driving something else, because they tend to put their weight up really high. This thing drives better, but not a lot better, which strikes me as odd. So I had said that in the I think it was in the spotlight on the kernel that we were entering a new period when I had gone through all the different tire choices, and this is yet another set of tires still. So I think there's been 9 or 10 sets of tires on this truck, and 3 different sets of shocks, 2 motors, 2 steering servos. So we've been battling my nature versus the nature of the kernel to try to arrive at some kind of middle ground, and I just want him to be able to do what the other rigs here do, and he almost can. But I came to a realization at a point today when I think it might be in the final edit. There's a point where he falls off of an obstacle so hard, I thought we were going to encounter the first DNF of the entire series, because it looked like he had knocked one of his wheels off, and that's like not a thing that happens to these. It was a false alarm. He was fine, and we continued on, but this thing, despite maneuvering at lower speeds, like he kind of tools along, the rollover point, that tipping point, is completely unpredictable. Like, watch how smoothly just went down that no problem at all. I've had multiple rigs just flip off that several times, and he handles this pretty well. And I don't know if it's the width of this particular wheel tire combo, but this rig can get completely sideways and get out of it. So I would say that his trailing nature, at least in this contest, the Colonel would have benefited if there were actual penalties. Like if there were penalties for rolling over, or penalties for having to be reset at a gate, which I didn't do. If there were, he would have done remarkably well, because he self-righted almost every time that he fell or rolled. So right up here, I think it's gate 59 here at the top of the waterfall. He falls off here. No, it wasn't in this run. In the timed run, he fell off and probably lost 4 or 5 seconds in this spot, because he landed on gate 60 with such force. Because, I mean, he just dead dropped like 3.5 feet onto his side. But shook it off, I suppose. I had noticed, checking the time, that when he was running, he passed gate 45, which would be the halfway point in terms of gates, but not the halfway point in terms of length. Anyway, he hit gate 45 at about 5 minutes 15 seconds, which is in the top 3 in terms of speed. And then to make it to gate 70, I want to say, to make it from gate 45 to gate 70 took, I think, 6 minutes. Between 6 and 7 minutes. So his speed dropped to half. The second part of the course is definitely more rock crawling than trailing. And that particular section right there, luckily in the timed run it went better, because in the filming I just kept one little flip and recovery in the final edit. I think that total clip was probably 4.5 minutes long, but I never had to touch the truck once. He would just roll onto his wheels every time. Which, now that it's got almost as much brass as you can put on the bottom as possible, he's gotten really good at self-righting. And this section right here of Ancient Kingdom used to be a lot more of a problem. He clears the really rough section in Precious Stones, no problem. He could really have more steer angle, but I mean, what crawler couldn't really? Because he manages this section, which is, I guess, sort of traily. Little roll there. But after the gate, so, because he cleaned the section through the root, no problem, and as soon as that front wheel dropped off, it just flipped. Like, there's no catching it. And that's the gripe. I don't know. The shocks are 10 millimeters shorter than stock and have 70 weight oil in them. And the body still wiggles around like a bobblehead. I don't know how thick of oil I need to put in this thing to get it to slow it down. Yes, all that weight has helped. And by helped, I mean make it behave more like what it isn't. Because another half completed thought from earlier, all it would take to make the 10-3 a completely competent rock crawler is take away from it everything that makes it an SCX 10-3. You get rid of that body and the fenders and that gearbox and put yourself a regular 3-gear gearbox in there, or a 3-gear with a dig unit. Heck, put a stealth in there from an element in there. And it would honestly, it would transform the way it handles. But then it's not an SCX 10.3 anymore. It's we've reverted. We're turning it. We're lopping a Roman numeral off and turning it into an SCX 10.2. So the renaissance of me and the Colonel has gotten to a, I don't know, a turning point where, like, the tires are pretty good, but could still maybe be better. But it does drive pretty well, but not well enough to forgive those foibles where it will just roll on you without warning. And I can't figure out, is that something I did? Is it something it does? But here we are, gate 90. The Colonel crosses the line here at the end, quite plastered in mud, with honestly an impressive 14:34.97, which right now puts him in a pretty solid 4th place. And I was genuinely surprised by that. I was as surprised by that as I was by how poorly Jolly Green did relative to his other performance, his prior performances. So that's 6 of 8 in the books. There's just 2 left to go. Argentum the Phoenix is up next, and I can prognosticate pretty confidently that he's going to do better than the Colonel. Maybe better than Daphne. I think there's still a top spot up for grabs. There's still a podium spot up for grabs. Possibly. And then after that, it's just Ironsides, and that one's going to be rough, I think. I want to be surprised, but I don't think I will be. So anyhow, it's late. I can't even remember what I talked about previously. As per usual, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next one. Like and subscribe. Crawler Canyon on Instagram. I really need to make an end card. And hope to see you next time.